I was handing out water at a relief camp when a sophisticated old man froze, staring at me like he had seen a ghost. He did not ask my name. He simply asked if I had ever received any money from my grandfather. I said no. His face went pale. Somewhere, a $3 million trust in my name had vanished, and the person who took it was the one I used to call family. My name is Camila Knight. I am 24 years old, and for the last 3 weeks, my entire existence has been reduced to the circumference of a plastic cot and the endless, rhythmic lifting of water crates. The humidity in Wilmington, North Carolina, does not just sit on you, it owns you. It soaks into the fabric of your clothes and the pores of your skin until you feel heavy, like you are walking underwater. The charity camp was set up in the hollowed-out shell of an old distribution center, a cavernous space echoing with the coughs of displaced families and the constant, grating hum of industrial generators. I was not technically a victim of the storm, not in the way the families huddled in the corner were. My storm had been personal, a financial hurricane that stripped me bare long before the winds hit the coast. But here, the currency was simple. If I volunteered for 12 hours, hauling supplies and checking names off a clipboard, I got a hot meal and a place to sleep where I did not have to worry about someone stealing my shoes. It was a fair trade, or at least, it was the only trade I had left. I was working the mid-afternoon shift, the time of day when the air turns stagnant and tempers start to fray. My hair was tied back in a messy knot, strands of it plastered to my neck with sweat. I wore a generic gray t-shirt provided by the organizers and jeans that had seen the inside of a washing machine perhaps 2 times in the last month. I looked like everyone else here, tired, worn down, invisible. That was the goal. Invisibility was safety. I picked up another case of bottled water, the plastic crinkling under my grip, and turned to set it on the distribution table. That was when I saw him. He stood out like a diamond in a coal chute. He was an older man, perhaps in his early 70s, standing near the entrance of the bay doors. He was trying to look inconspicuous, I could tell. He wore a plain navy windbreaker and dark trousers, the kind of outfit someone wealthy wears when they want to blend in with the common folk, but fails miserably because the fabric is too high quality and the tailoring is too perfect. He held himself with a rigid military posture that screamed authority. His hair was a shock of silver, perfectly combed despite the humidity. He was not looking at the line of people. He was not looking at the structural damage of the building. He was looking directly at me. It was not a casual glance. It was the kind of stare that stops time. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open, as if he had just seen a ghost walk out of a grave. I froze, the case of water still heavy in my arms. In this environment, staring usually meant trouble. It meant someone recognized you, or someone wanted something from you that you did not want to give. I lowered the water onto the table and wiped my hands on my jeans, averting my eyes. I tried to make myself busy, rearranging the protein bars, checking the inventory list. Just keep moving. Camila, just keep your head down. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw him move. He was cutting through the crowd, ignoring the designated lanes, moving with a singular, terrifying focus. He was coming straight for me. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I looked around for security, but the volunteer guards were busy breaking up a dispute over blankets on the other side of the hall. The man stopped 2 feet away from the table. Up close, he looked even more out of place. He smelled of expensive soap and old leather, a scent so foreign to this place of bleach and body odor that it made me dizzy. He did not say hello. He did not ask for water. He did not ask me if I knew where the restroom was. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gripped the edge of the table as if he needed it to hold himself upright. His blue eyes, watery and wide, searched my face with a desperate intensity. "You," he breathed out. His voice was raspy, dry. "You look exactly like her." I took a step back, my defensive instincts flaring. "Sir, you need to get in line if you want supplies. The line starts back at the blue tape." He ignored me. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a whisper, as if he was afraid the concrete walls were listening. Answer me one question. Just one. I looked at his eyes. There was no malice there, only a profound, shattering grief. It caught me off guard. What? I asked, my voice sharp. Did you ever receive any money from your grandfather? The question hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. Of all the things he could have asked, my name, my age, why I was here, he asked the one thing that had been a closed door in my life for as long as I could remember. I stared at him, trying to process the absurdity of the moment. Excuse me. Your grandfather, he repeated, the words tumbling out with urgency. Did you ever receive a trust fund? A monthly stipend? Anything? Did you get the money? A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat, harsh and jagged. I looked down at my worn-out sneakers, then back at this stranger in his $1,000 windbreaker. Money from my grandfather. I shook my head, the anger rising quickly. Mister, I do not know who you think I am, but you have the wrong person. My grandfather wanted nothing to do with me. The old man flinched. What? You heard me, I said, my voice rising slightly, drawing a few glances from the people nearby. My guardian, Marla, made that very clear since I was 6 years old. My grandfather hated my mother for leaving, and he hated me for existing. He washed his hands of us. He never sent a dime. He never sent a card. He never even called. I moved to walk away, to get back to work, to escape this bizarre interrogation. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. No. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. It was not a hard grip, but it was firm. I spun around, ready to shout for security, but the look on his face stopped me cold. He looked like he was having a heart attack. His face had gone from pale to a sickly gray. He was shaking his head. His eyes squeezed shut for a moment as if he was in physical pain. That is a lie, he whispered. He opened his eyes, and they were filled with tears. That is a lie. Camila. He knew my name. The blood drained from my face. Who are you? I demanded, yanking my arm back. How do you know my name? He took a shaky breath, straightening his spine with visible effort. My name is Rowan Langford. I am your grandfather. The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the camp, the crying babies, the shouting volunteers, the hum of the generator seemed to fade into a dull roar. I stared at him. I looked for the resemblance. I looked for the monster Marla had described, the cold, unfeeling tyrant who had abandoned us, but all I saw was a frightened, desperate old man. No, I said, shaking my head. No, you are lying. My grandfather is in Chicago. He does not care about me. I am from Chicago, he said, and I have cared. I have cared every single day. He took a step closer, his voice trembling with emotion. Camilla, I sent money. I sent checks. I set up a trust. For 18 years. I sent money every single month to Marla Keene for your care. Every single month? I stared at him, my mind racing. This had to be a scam. It had to be. People targeted relief camps all the time. They looked for vulnerable young women, spun them fairy tales about lost inheritances or family connections, and then tried to traffic them or steal their identity. I had to be smart. I had to be cold. Prove it, I snapped. I crossed my arms over my chest, creating a barrier between us. You say you are my grandfather. Prove it, because right now, you look like a crazy person who just walked in off the street. Rowan Langford did not get angry. He did not bluster or yell. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. His fingers were shaking so badly he fumbled with the clasp. He pulled out a small, worn photograph and held it out to me. I hesitated, then took it. It was a Polaroid. The colors faded with age. It showed a young woman sitting on a porch swing, laughing, her head thrown back. She was holding a baby me. I knew the woman. It was my mother. I had a few photos of her, but I had never seen this one. But that was not what made my breath hitch. Look at her wrist, Rowan said softly. I looked, on my mother's right wrist, clear as day, was a charm bracelet. It was silver, with a single, distinct charm, a tiny, silver lighthouse. My hand flew to my neck, hidden under my gray t-shirt, resting against my skin. Was that exact charm? My mother had given it to me before she died. I had worn it on a cheap chain for 20 years. I had never taken it off. I had never shown it to anyone. Marla had tried to sell it once, and I had buried it in the backyard for a month until she stopped looking. She bought that in Maine, Rowan said, his voice thick with emotion. When she was 16, we went on a road trip, just the two of us. She loved lighthouses. She said they were the only things that knew how to stand their ground in a storm. I looked up at him, the photo trembling in my hand. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. He knew. He really knew. "You are him," I whispered. "I am," he said. We stood there for a long moment, an island of silence in the chaos of the camp. I looked at this man, this stranger who shared my blood, and I felt a confusing mix of relief and rage. "If you are him," I said, my voice hardening, "then why am I here? Why have I spent the last 6 years scraping by? Why did I have to drop out of college because I could not afford the tuition? Why am I sleeping on a cot in a warehouse?" Rowan looked around at the grim surroundings of the camp. He looked at my worn shoes, my tired eyes, the red marks on my hands from hauling boxes. A look of pure devastation crossed his face. "I thought you were in Europe," he said, his voice barely audible. "Marla told me you were studying art in Florence. She sent me emails. She sent me updates. She said you were happy. She said you were safe. Florence." I let out a sharp, incredulous breath. "I have never even left the country. I was working 2 jobs at a diner and a warehouse until the layoffs hit. Marla kicked me out the day I turned 18. She said the money had run out. She said there was nothing left." Rowan's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before. It was the color of a man realizing he had been murdered while he was still alive. "The money ran out," he repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Yes," I said. "That is what she said. No more child support. No more handouts." Rowan closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes again, the sadness was gone, replaced by something else, something cold and sharp and terrifying. "Camilla," he said, and his voice was steady now, deadly serious. "There is a trust fund, a specific, irrevocable trust fund, established in your name the year your mother died." He paused, making sure I was listening to every word. "It currently holds, or it should hold, a principal amount of $3 million. I stared at him. My brain refused to process the number. $3 million. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against the crumpled bills I had saved. $142. That was everything I had in the world. That was my safety net. That was my future. $3 million. I choked out. "That is impossible. That is not real." "It is real," Rowan said, "and I have transferred a monthly allowance for your living expenses and education totaling nearly $10,000 a month for the last 6 years, on top of the principal." My knees felt weak. I had to grab the table to stop myself from falling. $10,000 a month. I had lived on less than that for an entire year. I had skipped meals. I had walked 5 miles to work to save bus fare. I had slept in my car when I lost my apartment. And all that time, I never saw it, I whispered. "I never saw a penny," Marla said. I swallowed hard, the bile rising in my throat. "Marla said you forgot about me." Rowan stepped closer. He placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was warm, solid. It was the first time a family member had touched me with anything other than annoyance in years. "I did not forget you, Camilla," he said fiercely. "I made a mistake, a terrible, arrogant mistake. I trusted the wrong people because I was too much of a coward to face my own grief, and I will spend the rest of my life making that up to you." He looked deep into my eyes, and then he asked the question that would change everything. The question that would burn down the life I knew and build something new from the ashes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. But we have a problem. Camila, because I have the bank records, the money was sent, the checks were cashed, the withdrawals were made. He paused, and the air between us turned electric. If you did not receive a single dime, he said, then who has been signing for it all these years? To understand why a billionaire was shaking in a humid relief camp in North Carolina. You have to go back 72 hours. You have to go to Chicago. To a penthouse that cost more than the entire neighborhood I was currently sleeping in. I was not there, of course, but I have heard this story enough times now, pieced together from Gideon's dry factual reports and my grandfather's late-night confessions, that I can see it. I can feel the conditioned air chilling the sweat on his neck. I can see the view of Lake Michigan, gray and indifferent, staring back at him through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Rowan Langford was standing by that window, waiting. He was 72 years old, a man who had built an empire on steel and logistics, a man who could spot a fracture in a supply chain from a continent away. But he had been blind to the fracture in his own bloodline for nearly 2 decades. The doorbell rang. It was not a social call. It was Gideon Price, a private investigator whose rates were high enough to ensure discretion and whose face was forgettable enough to ensure results. Rowan had hired him a week prior, a nagging suspicion finally getting the better of him after a bounced email and a disconnected phone number. Gideon walked in, carrying a thick manila envelope. He did not sit down. He did not accept the offer of a drink. He simply walked over to the glass desk that dominated the center of the room and laid the envelope down. "You are not going to like this, Mr. Langford," Gideon said. His voice was flat, devoid of sympathy. In his line of work, sympathy was inefficient. Rowan stared at the envelope. For a moment, he felt a flicker of the old fear, the grief he had been running from since the day my mother died. He had used money as a shield, a way to keep the past at bay. He had told himself that writing checks was the same as caring. He had told himself that staying away was a kindness, that his presence would only remind the child of the mother she had lost. He reached out and opened the envelope. The first thing that slid out was a photograph. It was taken from a distance, likely with a telephoto lens. It showed a young woman, me, standing in a line. I was wearing a faded denim jacket that was 2 sizes too big and staring at the ground. Behind me was a sign that read, "Emergency Relief Distribution." Rowan picked up the photo. His hand, usually steady as a rock, began to tremble. "This was taken yesterday," Gideon said. "Wilmington, North Carolina. She is staying at a temporary shelter set up in an old warehouse." Rowan felt the air leave the room. He looked at the photo, really looked at it. He saw the dark circles under my eyes. He saw the cheap, worn-out sneakers. He saw the lack of a phone, a purse, or any of the trappings of a modern 24-year-old. This was not the girl Marla Keene had described to him. For 18 years, Marla, my father's cousin and my legal guardian, had been the bridge between Rowan and me. And for 18 years, the bridge had been paved with glowing updates. Rowan closed his eyes, the memory of those emails burning in his mind. "Camila is doing wonderful. Rowan, she's top of her class in French. Camila loves the new piano we bought with the trust allowance. She has a real gift. Camila has been accepted to a private art program in Florence. It is expensive, but it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Rowan had read those emails and felt a mixture of relief and absolution. He had signed the authorizations. He had increased the monthly stipend. He had told himself that even if he could not be a grandfather, he could be a provider. He had bought himself peace of mind for $10,000 a month. "This is a mistake," Rowan said, his voice raspy. He dropped the photo onto the glass desk. "This cannot be her. Marla told me she is in Europe. She is finishing her degree." Gideon did not argue. He simply reached into the envelope and pulled out another sheet of paper. "Marla Keene is not in Europe. She is in Lake Brenton, about 40 miles from where that photo was taken. And as for your granddaughter, Gideon tapped the photo of me in the camp. She has been homeless for 6 months. Mr. Langford, she was evicted from a studio apartment in February. She has no vehicle registered in her name. She has no active credit cards. She has 0 assets. Rowan felt a wave of nausea. He turned away from the desk, walking back to the window. The city of Chicago looked cold and sharp below him. He had failed. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had thought his money was a wall protecting me. Instead, it seemed it had been a curtain hiding my suffering. "The money," Rowan whispered. "I sent $3 million into the principal trust. I sent monthly allowances. Where did it go?" "That is the question," Gideon said, opening a second folder. "I pulled the bank records you authorized. The money is going in, exactly as you scheduled, and it is going out, just as regularly." Rowan turned back, his eyes hardening. "Show me." Gideon spread a series of spreadsheets across the desk, rows and rows of numbers. Rowan's eyes scanned them, his business instincts kicking in through the fog of his emotions. August 1st, transfer in, $10,000. August 3rd, withdrawal, $9,500. Label family maintenance housing. September 1st, transfer in, $10,000. September 2nd, withdrawal, $9,800. Label educational support. It was a pattern. Money in, money out. The labels were vague, designed to look legitimate to a casual observer. Medical expenses, home repairs, transportation. "I drove by Marla Keene's residence," Gideon said, sliding another photo across the desk. This photo showed a beautiful 2-story colonial house in a leafy suburb. There was a brand new luxury SUV in the driveway. The landscaping was immaculate. A contractor's van was parked out front, unloading high-end kitchen appliances. "She has done extensive renovations in the last 2 years," Gideon noted dryly. "New roof, new pool, an extension on the master suite, all while your granddaughter was sleeping in her car." Rowan felt a cold rage settling in his chest. It was a different kind of anger than he had ever felt in the boardroom. This was personal. This was a violation of the only sacred thing he had left. He had entrusted Marla with his own flesh and blood because he was too cowardly to face the resemblance I bore to my mother. He had let his grief paralyze him, and Marla had seen that paralysis as an opportunity. He picked up the photo of the house and crushed it in his fist. "She lied to me," Rowan said, his voice low and dangerous. "For 18 years, she fed me fairy tales while my granddaughter starved." "It appears so," Gideon said. "But Mr. Langford, you need to be careful. If you call her, if you alert the bank, she will know you know. If she has access to the liquid assets in the trust, she could drain the remainder before we can get a court order." Rowan looked at the photo of me again, the girl in the camp, the girl with his daughter's eyes and a stranger's exhaustion. "I am not calling her," Rowan said. He walked over to the closet and pulled out a travel bag. "I am going there." "Mr. Langford," Gideon warned, stepping forward. "You should let the lawyers handle this. You are too emotional. You need to verify the identity first. You need to—" "I need to look her in the eye," Rowan shouted, the sound echoing off the glass walls. He stopped, taking a jagged breath to steady himself. "I need to know if she even knows who I am. I need to know if she hates me." He threw a few shirts into the bag, not caring if they wrinkled. He grabbed his checkbook, his passport, and the file Gideon had brought. "Book the jet," Rowan commanded. "We leave in an hour. Wilmington." "Sir, the weather in North Carolina is still unstable," Gideon argued. "The airport is operating on limited capacity." "Then find an airport that is open and drive me the rest of the way," Rowan snapped. "I am not spending another night in this apartment while she is sleeping on a cot." Gideon nodded, recognizing the tone. It was the tone Rowan used when he was about to acquire a company or destroy a competitor. But as Gideon reached for his phone to make the arrangements, he paused. He looked down at the file one last time, flipping to the back page. "There is one more thing, Rowan," Gideon said quietly. He dropped the formality of Mr. for the first time. Rowan stopped zipping his bag. What? I was looking at the correspondence log for the trust, Gideon said. The annual statements, the legal notices, the things the bank is required by law to mail to the beneficiary or the guardian. Marla receives them, Rowan said impatiently. She has power of attorney. She does, Gideon agreed. But 3 years ago, the mailing address for the trust's official correspondence was changed. Rowan frowned. Changed to what? Her new house? No, Gideon said. He looked up, his eyes meeting Rowan's with a grim significance. It was changed to a P.O. box in Chicago, a box that does not belong to Marla Keene. Rowan froze. Chicago. Why would Marla have the mail sent to Chicago? She wouldn't, Gideon said, unless she is not the only one involved. The silence in the room stretched thin, heavy with a new, terrifying implication. Who owns the box? Rowan asked. I am working on it, Gideon replied. But the request to change the address, it was flagged in your internal system as administrative update. It bypassed the usual security checks because it came from a trusted source. Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. An internal source. Someone in his own world, his own circle, had helped divert the eyes of the bank. Marla was a suburban housewife. She did not know how to navigate the complex compliance laws of a $3 million trust fund. She had help. We are going to North Carolina, Rowan said, his voice turning to ice. We get the girl, we secure her safety, and then he looked out at the skyline of Chicago, a city he thought he owned, realizing now that there were snakes in his own garden. And then, Rowan finished, we find out who opened the gate. He zipped the bag shut with a final, decisive sound. He did not know it yet, but that zipper was the sound of a war beginning. A war that would tear down the polite facade of his family and expose the rot underneath. But first, he had to find me. He had to find the girl he had failed. Rowan walked out of the penthouse without looking back. The photo of me in the charity camp remained on the desk, the only colorful thing in a room of gray. A beacon calling him into the storm. The chaos of the distribution line had settled into a dull, aching rhythm by the time the camp manager, a formidable woman named Mrs. Higgins, who wore a vest filled with more pens than a stationery store, tapped me on the shoulder. She looked at me with a mixture of concern and professional approval. She told me that the gentleman was waiting outside, that he had asked permission to speak with me properly, and that he had been polite enough to wait while I finished my shift. She added, in a lower voice, that I was the hardest worker she had on the floor, and if this man was bothering me, she had a whistle that would summon 3 security guards in under 10 seconds. I told her it was okay. I told her he was family, though the word felt strange and foreign on my tongue, like trying to speak a language I had not heard since I was a toddler. I found Rowan Langford waiting by the chain-link fence that separated the camp from the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. He had taken off his expensive windbreaker and folded it neatly over his arm, standing in his dress shirt, sweating just like the rest of us. He did not look like a billionaire industrialist in that moment. He looked like an old man who was lost. When he saw me, he straightened up, but he did not rush forward. He seemed to have learned his lesson from our first encounter. He waited for me to approach him. I am finished for the day, I said, keeping a safe distance. My guard was still up. I had spent too many nights sleeping with one eye open to trust a miracle just because it had a kind face. But we are not talking here, and we are not talking in front of cameras. If I see a phone recording me, I am walking away, and you will never see me again. Understood, Rowan said immediately. No cameras, no spectacle, just us. I led him to a diner 2 blocks away. It was a place called the Rusty Spoon, the kind of establishment where the menus were sticky with the ghosts of maple syrup from a decade ago, and the air smelled permanently of bacon grease and sanitizer. It was neutral ground. It was real. It was miles away from the world Rowan clearly inhabited. We sat in a booth with vinyl seats that were patched with duct tape. I ordered a black coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. Rowan ordered the same, though I saw him eyeing the cup with a subtle suspicion before taking a sip. For the first few minutes, we just sat there. The silence was thick, heavy with 18 years of absence. I watched him. I looked for the monster Marla had told me about. I looked for the man who hated me. But every time he looked at me, his eyes went soft, filled with a sadness that seemed to pull down the corners of his mouth. "Your mother," he started, his voice quiet against the clatter of silverware from the kitchen. "She used to do this thing when she was thinking. She would tear up her napkins." I froze. My hand was currently resting on a shredded paper napkin I had unconsciously pulled apart while we were waiting. Rowan smiled. A small, heartbreaking expression. "She would tear them into little strips and braid them. She did it at dinner. She did it at church. She did it when she was doing her homework. My wife, your grandmother, used to scold her for making a mess, but I always found them tucked into the couch cushions days later." He reached out and gently touched one of the paper strips I had created. "She also hated the word moist," he added, a twinkle entering his eye. "If anyone said it, she would leave the room, and she put salt on her apples." I felt a lump form in my throat, hard and painful. "Granny Smith apples," I whispered. "With sea salt. She made me try it once. It was awful." Rowan laughed, a genuine, rusty sound. "It was terrible, but she insisted it was sophisticated." The tension in my shoulders finally began to uncoil. Marla knew facts about my mother, her birthday, her social security number, the day she died. But Marla never knew about the salt on the apples. She never knew about the napkins. These were the tiny, intimate geometries of a life lived together. This man was not a stranger. He was the keeper of memories I had lost. "Okay," I said, letting out a long breath. "Okay, you are him. You are really him." Rowan nodded. "I am." "So why now?" I asked. "If you cared so much, why show up when I am at the bottom? Where were you when I was 18 and Marla told me to get out?" Rowan's face fell. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug of coffee. "I was in Chicago, reading emails that said you were happy, but that is not an excuse. I should have come. I should have checked." He looked me in the eye. "Tell me how you got here. Camila, the truth, not the version Marla might tell." I looked down at the dark liquid in my cup. It was embarrassing to admit failure to a man who looked like he owned the bank, but I owed him the truth. "I did everything right," I said, my voice steady. "I graduated high school with honors. I got into 3 good universities, but Marla said there was no money for tuition, and I did not qualify for financial aid because on paper, I was your granddaughter." Rowan winced. "So I went to work," I continued. "I got a job at Harborline Logistics. It was a good job. I started in the warehouse and moved up to inventory coordination. I had an apartment. I had a car payment. I was saving for night classes." "Harborline," Rowan repeated, recognizing the name. "They are a mid-sized regional carrier." "They were," I corrected. "They got bought out 6 months ago. The new owners stripped the assets and laid off 60% of the workforce. I was in the first wave. I applied for unemployment. But the system in this state is broken. It took 12 weeks to get a check. By then, my savings were gone." I traced the rim of the cup. "My landlord raised the rent by $400 a month in the same week my car transmission died. It was a domino effect. One thing fell, then everything fell. I sold the car to pay the rent, thinking I would find a job fast. I did not. I got evicted in February. I couch surfed for a while. But you run out of favors eventually. So I came to the camp. It is safe. They let me work. It is a way to stand up again." I looked up at him, defying him to pity me. "I am not a junkie. I am not lazy. I just ran out of luck." Rowan listened to every word, his face growing paler with every sentence. He looked like a man who was watching a building collapse in slow motion. "You missed college because you thought there was no money," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I missed college because I could not afford $500 for the deposit. I said flatly. Rowan closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was trembling with a suppressed rage. Camilla, the trust fund I set up, the principal alone is $3 million. The interest and dividends generated an allowance of roughly $10,000 every single month. That money was specifically designated for your education, your housing, your medical care. I stared at him. Then, I started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was a dry, jagged sound that hurt my chest. $3 million, I repeated. $3 million. I looked around the dirty diner. I looked at the waitress wiping down the counter with a gray rag. I thought about the nights I had slept in a park because the shelters were full. I thought about the time I had an infected tooth and pulled it out myself with pliers and whiskey because I could not afford a dentist. That is a funny joke, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. It is hilarious, because last week I had to choose between buying deodorant or buying laundry detergent. I chose the detergent so I wouldn't smell while I volunteered. It is not a joke, Rowan said intensely. Someone stole your life. Camilla, someone took that money and let you suffer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. I have a lawyer. His name is Grant Holloway. He is the best forensic attorney in Chicago. I want your permission to let him tear this trust apart. I want your permission to find out where every single cent went. I looked at the phone. It represented a world of power I did not understand, but I also felt a cold knot of fear in my stomach. I knew how these things went. The rich fought, and the poor got crushed in the middle. I will agree, I said slowly, but on one condition. Anything, Rowan said. I am not a pawn, I said, leaning forward. I do not want to be a headline. I do not want to be the poor little orphan girl used to help you get your money back. If we do this, we do it to find the truth, and I want to know everything. Do not hide things from me to protect me. I have lived on the street. I can handle the truth. Rowan looked at me with a newfound respect. He saw the steel in my spine, the resilience that the last few years had forged. I promise, he said. You are not a pawn. Camilla, you are the boss. This is your money. This is your fight. I am just here to provide the ammunition. Then, his face softened, the professional mask slipping entirely. And I am sorry. I know sorry does not pay the rent. I know sorry does not fix the tooth you pulled. But I am sorry I let you grow up without me. I was a coward who was afraid of a ghost, and I let my fear hurt you. I will never forgive myself for that. The anger in my chest, the hard knot that had been there for years, loosened just a fraction. I saw the tears standing in his eyes. He was not asking for forgiveness. He was just stating a fact. We will see, I said. It was the best I could offer. Just then, the phone on the table buzzed. It was a harsh, jarring sound. Rowan looked at the screen. It is Grant, he said. He picked it up and put it on speaker, keeping his promise of transparency. Grant, I am here with Camilla. The voice on the other end was crisp, fast, and urgent. Rowan, I am glad you are sitting down. I just got off the phone with the bank's fraud department. We pushed hard using the power of attorney. And, Rowan asked. The account has been drained significantly, Grant said. There was a withdrawal of $200,000 just 3 days ago, but that is not the headline. I held my breath. I pulled the digital copies of the authorization slips for the last 5 years. Grant continued. Rowan, the signature on the withdrawal requests, it is signed Camilla Knight, but I'm looking at the signature on her old passport application you had on file, and I am looking at this. They are not even close. Rowan looked at me. I shook my head, my eyes wide. I have never signed anything. I do not even have a bank account. It gets worse. Grant's voice crackled over the speaker. The notary stamp on these documents, it belongs to a notary in a county Camilla has never lived in, and the witness signature on the latest withdrawal, it does not match Marla Keene's handwriting either. Rowan's hand tightened around the phone. Then whose is it? It is messy, Grant said. But it looks like someone was trying to copy a signature they had seen before. It looks like Well, it looks like they were trying to copy yours, Rowan. The diner went silent. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Someone had not just stolen from me. Someone had impersonated me, and someone had tried to frame my grandfather's own authority to do it. Rowan looked at me, and for the first time, the sadness in his eyes was replaced by a cold, sharp determination. They did not just take the money, Rowan whispered to me. They stole your name. Then let's take it back, I said, and for the first time in 6 years, I did not feel invisible anymore. I felt dangerous. We moved from the diner to a hotel suite that Rowan had booked near the riverfront. It was not just a room. It was a command center. The transition from my plastic cot at the charity camp to the plush beige carpet of the Marriott was so jarring it made me feel like I was walking on the moon. But there was no time to appreciate the air conditioning or the bowl of fresh fruit on the table. We were at war. Grant Holloway, Rowan's attorney, was not physically in the room, but his presence was suffocating. He was projected onto the large television screen via a secure video link, his background a blur of glass and steel in a Chicago high-rise. He looked like a shark in a suit, efficient and terrifyingly calm. I have obtained the preliminary breakdown of the trust's expenditures for the last fiscal year, Grant said, his voice crisp. I had to threaten the bank manager with a federal audit to get them to release the detailed line items this quickly, but we have them. Rowan sat on the edge of the sofa, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man preparing for a fistfight. Read them, he commanded. Read every single one. Grant looked down at a document in his hands. January 3rd, tuition payment to St. Jude's Preparatory Academy. $12,500. The room went silent. St. Jude's? I asked, the name tasting like copper in my mouth. That is the private school on the north side of the city, the one with the equestrian team. Did you attend St. Jude's, Camilla? Grant asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. I went to Wilmington Public High, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I took the bus. We shared textbooks that were 10 years old. I have never set foot in St. Jude's. Grant made a mark on his paper. February 10th, vehicle maintenance and lease payment for a Range Rover Sport, $1,800. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. I drove a Honda Civic with a cracked windshield until the transmission died. Then I walked. March 15th, Grant continued, his tempo increasing, relentless as a drumbeat. Medical expenses, orthodontic restructuring, and cosmetic dentistry, $5,000. I ran my tongue over my teeth. My bottom canine was slightly twisted. Crowding the incisor next to it, it was not bad, but it was definitely not $5,000 worth of perfect. Look at my smile, Grant, I said to the screen. Does this look like $5,000 to you? No, Grant said simply. It does not? April 1st, Grant read, educational enrichment trip, Paris, France, flight and accommodation, $8,000. I stood up. I could not sit anymore. I paced the length of the room, my hands balling into fists. I was working double shifts at the warehouse in April, I said, my voice rising. I remember because it was inventory month. I worked 14 days straight without a break. I ate ramen noodles in the break room while someone else was eating croissants in Paris on my dime. Rowan did not say a word. He was staring at the floor, his face a mask of absolute agony. He was not just hearing numbers, he was hearing the quantification of his own failure. Every dollar read aloud was a testament to his negligence. Grant, Rowan said, his voice low. Cross-reference the St. Jude's payment if Camilla was not the student, who was, I am already on it, came a new voice. Gideon Price, the investigator, stepped into the frame of the video call behind Grant. He held a tablet. I hacked the school's parent portal. It is not secure if you know the right back doors. The tuition is being paid for a student named Sloane Keene. Sloane, I whispered. That is Marla's niece. She is my age. She moved in with us when we were 16. I remembered Sloane. She had always had nice clothes. She had always had the latest phone. I had assumed her parents sent her money, or that Marla was just generous with her. I never asked. I was trained not to ask. Sloane is the beneficiary of your education, Gideon confirmed, and the Range Rover. It is registered to Marla Keene, but Sloane is listed as the primary driver. Rowan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Cape Fear River. I received reports, he said, speaking to the glass. Every quarter, Marla sent me progress reports. They were detailed. They had grades. They had photos. He turned back to me, his eyes pleading. Camila, I saw photos of you. You were smiling. You were holding awards. Show me, I said. Rowan unlocked his phone and scrolled through his email archive. He found a folder labeled Camila, Updates, and handed the phone to me. I looked at the screen. The first photo was of me, standing in the backyard, wearing a beautiful navy blue dress, holding a certificate. I remembered that day. I was 15, I said, pointing at the image. Marla bought me this dress for a church event. She made me pose with this certificate. It was just a participation award for a local debate club. She took 50 photos, told me to smile bigger, look happier. Then, 10 minutes later, she made me take the dress off because she said she had to return it. She said it was too expensive to keep. I spent the rest of the day in my sweatpants doing chores. I swiped to the next photo. It was me sitting at a piano. I do not play piano, I said flatly. She told me to sit there because the light was good. She said she wanted a picture for the Christmas card. Rowan took the phone back. His hands were shaking. It was all a set, he murmured. She was directing a play, and I was the only audience member. I sat back down, the weight of the deception pressing on my chest. It was not just the theft. It was the psychological grooming. I remembered all the times I had asked Marla about money. When I needed money for a field trip or for a prom ticket, don't you worry your pretty little head about money. Sweetie, Marla would say, her voice dripping with fake honey. Family takes care of family. You just focus on being a good girl. Your grandfather doesn't want to be bothered with receipts. She trained me, I realized aloud. She trained me to be grateful for scraps so I would never ask for the whole meal. She told me you hated to be bothered. She made me afraid to reach out to you. She built a wall, Rowan said, and she used my money to buy the bricks. Grant, I said, turning back to the screen. How did she get away with this for so long? A trust this big? Surely there are audits. Surely someone checks to see if the person getting the money is actually alive and receiving it. That is the $3 million question, Grant said grimly. I looked into the compliance history of the trust. When it was established 18 years ago, it had a Level 1 verification protocol. That means an independent auditor was supposed to physically visit you and Marla once a year to verify living conditions. No one ever visited me, I said. Exactly, Grant said. Because 5 years ago, right after you turned 18, the protocol was downgraded to Level 3, digital verification only, scanned receipts, emailed reports, no physical checks. Who authorized that? Rowan demanded. I certainly did not. We are getting to that, Grant said. But first, I need you to look at this. A new document appeared on the screen. It was a PDF of a bank authorization form. It was dated 2 years ago. This is a request to liquidate a portion of the stock portfolio to cover emergency housing repairs after a flood, Grant explained. It required the signature of the beneficiary. I leaned in. At the bottom of the page, there was a signature Camilla Knight. I stared at it. It was a good attempt. It had the right letters, but the slant was wrong. I write with a heavy hand. The ink usually bleeds through the paper. This signature was light, airy, filled with flourishes I would never use. And the K in Knight, I loop my Ks. This one was sharp, jagged. That is not me, I said. 2 years ago. That was the summer I was working at the logistics center. I did not even have a pen on me half the time, let alone a document like this. It is a forgery, Grant confirmed. And not just a bad one, it is a criminal one. This document moved $200,000 into a contractor's account that we now know is linked to Marla's brother. Rowan's face hardened into a mask of stone. That is it, he said. We have them. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement. I want her arrested. I want the police at her door tonight. No, Grant said sharply. Rowan, listen to me. If you send the police tonight, she will claim it was a misunderstanding. She will claim she had verbal permission. She will shred the physical files she keeps in that house. She will transfer the remaining liquid cash to offshore accounts we cannot touch. Marla is smart. Rowan, she has been playing this game for 18 years. You do not catch a fox by screaming at the entrance to the den. Rowan clenched his jaw. Then what do we do? Do we just let her sleep in her renovated master suite while Camilla sleeps in a hotel? We go around her, Grant said. We get a temporary restraining order on the assets. We freeze the accounts ex parte, meaning without notifying her first. We need a judge to sign off on it tomorrow morning. Once the money is frozen, then we walk in. Then we drop the hammer. I looked at Rowan. He was vibrating with the need for action, the need for violence, the need to protect me. But Grant was right. I had lived on the streets. I knew that if you moved too fast, you spooked the prey. He is right, I said to Rowan. We wait. We let her think she is safe for one more night. Let her sleep soundly. It will make the wake-up call hurt more. Rowan let out a long, shuddering breath. He nodded. Fine. We freeze the assets tomorrow morning. There is one more thing, Grant said. Grant. His voice had dropped an octave. It was quieter, more dangerous. What is it? Rowan asked. I traced the authorization that lowered the verification protocol, Grant said. The one that switched off the physical audits 5 years ago. It required 2 signatures, one from the guardian Marla and one from the trust administrator. The bank assigns the administrator, Rowan said dismissively. Some low-level clerk. No, Rowan, Grant said. For a trust of this size, attached to the Langford family estate, the administrator has to be someone with executive clearance, someone from your side, someone internal. The air in the hotel room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Internal, Rowan repeated. You mean someone in my company, someone in my family office? Yes, Grant said. I pulled the metadata from the approval log. The digital signature key belongs to a terminal on the 44th floor of the Langford Tower. Rowan sat down slowly. The 44th floor was the executive suite. It was the floor where only his most trusted lieutenants worked, people he had known for decades, people he invited to Thanksgiving dinner. Who? Rowan asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Grant hesitated for a fraction of a second, as if he knew the name he was about to say would cause as much damage as the missing millions. The cosigner who authorized the removal of the safety checks, Grant said. Was Lance Whitmore. Rowan did not move. He did not blink. Lance Whitmore, his chief financial officer, his oldest friend, the man who was the godfather to his late daughter, the man who had held Rowan's hand at the funeral. Lance, Rowan breathed out. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a heart breaking. He signed it. Rowan, Grant said softly. The call is coming from inside the house. I watched my grandfather. In the span of an hour, he had learned that his granddaughter was destitute, his money was stolen, and his best friend was holding the knife. Freeze it all, Rowan said. His voice was dead. Freeze everything, and get the plane ready. We are going back to Chicago, I asked. Rowan looked at me. His eyes were dry now, and terrifyingly clear. No, he said. We are going to pay Marla a visit, and then I am going to bury Lance Whitmore. The drive to Lake Brenton was suffocatingly quiet. I sat in the back of the hired Lincoln Navigator, watching the scenery shift from the industrial gray of the relief camp to the manicured emerald green of the suburbs. It was a transition I had made in reverse 6 years ago. Falling from this world into the gutter, climbing back up felt unnatural, like my body was rejecting the altitude. Rowan sat beside me. He had barely spoken since we left the hotel, but his silence was loud. It was a vibrating, kinetic silence. He kept clasping and unclasping his hands, his knuckles turning white. In the front seat, Grant Holloway, who had flown in on a red-eye flight to join us personally, reviewed a stack of documents with the precision of a surgeon sharpening his scalpel. We pulled up to the house. I stopped breathing for a second. The last time I had seen Marla's house, it had been a modest, beige split level with peeling paint on the garage door and a lawn that was mostly crabgrass. The house in front of me was a fortress of new money. The beige siding was gone, replaced by tasteful, expensive stone veneer. The driveway had been repaved with intricate brickwork that probably cost more than my entire education. There was a new wing added to the west side, featuring large, cathedral-style windows that caught the afternoon sun. The lawn was perfect, striped from a professional mowing, dotted with expensive landscaping, mature Japanese maples, and perfectly trimmed boxwoods. "She spent it well," Grant murmured from the front seat, closing his file. "You have to give her credit for the aesthetic. It screams old money, even though the paint is barely dry." "It screams theft," Rowan said. His voice was so cold it could have frozen the engine block. "Let us go." We got out. I smoothed down the simple, clean blouse Rowan had bought me an hour ago. I felt like an imposter in the clothes, but I needed the armor. I walked up the path to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Rowan rang the bell. It took less than 10 seconds for the door to open, and there she was, Marla Keene. She looked 10 years younger than the last time I saw her. Her hair was a rich, glossy chestnut, perfectly blown out. Her skin was smooth, likely the result of the medical expenses Grant had read out earlier. She wore a cashmere cardigan and pearl earrings that were large enough to choke on. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and then, instantaneously, the mask slid into place. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but never with an audience of this caliber. "Camilla!" she shrieked, throwing her hands up. She lunged forward, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of expensive lavender and deceit. "Oh my God, you are home. We have been so worried." I stood stiff as a board, my arms pinned to my sides. Her embrace felt like a constrictor snake checking for a pulse. She pulled back, holding me by the shoulders, tears already glistening in her eyes. "Look at you. You are so thin. I told you that backpacking trip was a bad idea. I told you that you needed to come home." She looked past me to Rowan and Grant, her expression shifting to one of polite confusion, perfectly calibrated. "And you must be, oh my heavens, you are Mr. Langford." Rowan did not smile. He did not offer his hand. He simply stared at her with a look of profound disgust that he barely bothered to hide. "Mrs. Keene, we need to talk." Of course, Marla said, flustered but recovering quickly. She ushered us inside. "Please, come in. I was just making tea. Camilla, why didn't you call? I would have sent the car." We walked into the foyer. The interior was even worse than the exterior. It was like walking into a magazine spread. The floors were Italian marble. The chandelier above us was crystal. Every surface was covered in something new, something bought with the money intended to keep me off the street. "We met Camilla in Wilmington," Rowan said, his voice flat. "At a relief camp, where she has been living for 3 weeks. Marla let out a soft, indulgent laugh. She led us into the living room, gesturing for us to sit on a cream-colored sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. "Oh, the camp," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Camilla has always been so dramatic with her charity work. She gets these ideas. You know, she wants to experience the struggle to understand the art she is creating. I told her it is dangerous, but she is so headstrong, just like her mother." I felt the blood boil in my veins. I was not volunteering. "Marla," I said, my voice shaking. "I was homeless. I was evicted. You know that. I called you." Marla looked at me with a pitying smile, the kind you give to a confused child. "Honey, you know your memory gets fuzzy when you are off your medication. We talked about this." "I am not on medication," I snapped. "See," Marla whispered to Rowan, leaning in conspiratorially. She is very proud. She refuses help. Before Rowan could explode, a girl walked into the room. It was Sloane. She was 24, just like me. But she looked like a different species. She was glowing with health. She wore Lululemon leggings and a cropped hoodie that cost $200. She was holding an iced coffee and tapping on the latest iPhone. On her wrist, a diamond tennis bracelet caught the light. She stopped when she saw us. "Oh," she said. She looked at me, and for a second, her eyes flickered with genuine surprise. But she covered it with a bored expression. "You are back. I thought you were in, where was it, the woods?" "Hello, Sloane," I said. "Did you bring my charger back?" she asked, not even looking at the two men in suits. "I need it for packing. I'm going back to Cabo on Friday. The weather here is destroying my hair." Cabo. "Sloane, honey, we have guests," Marla said, her voice tight. "Go upstairs." "Fine," Sloane muttered. She turned and walked away, the rubber soles of her expensive sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. Grant waited until she was gone. Then he placed his briefcase on the coffee table. The sound was heavy. Final. "Mrs. Keene," Grant said. He did not introduce himself. He did not smile. "My name is Grant Holloway. I am the attorney for the Langford estate." Marla sat down in an armchair, crossing her legs. She smoothed her skirt. "Is this about the trust renewal I sent the paperwork to the bank last week?" "It is about the $3 million, Grant said. He opened the file. He did not slide the papers across the table. He held them, reading from them like a judge reading a verdict. "We have reviewed the forensic accounting. We have questions regarding the allocation of funds." Marla's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went hard. "I have managed that trust impeccably for 18 years. January 4th, Grant read, $12,000 to St. Jude's Academy. Camilla never attended St. Jude's. Sloane did." Marla sighed. "Camilla refused to go to private school. She wanted to be with her friends at the public school. We could not let the slot go to waste, so we sent Sloane. It is all in the family. Using trust funds designated for the beneficiary to pay for a third party is embezzlement," Grant said. "It was educational support," Marla countered smoothly. "The renovation," Grant continued. $300,000. You added a wing to the house. "To provide a suitable living environment for Camilla," Marla said, her voice rising with practiced indignation. "She needed space. She needed a studio. We built it for her." "I have never stepped foot in that wing," I said quietly. "You built it last year, after you kicked me out." "We built it in anticipation of your return," Marla shot back. She looked at Rowan, her eyes filling with tears again. "Mr. Langford, you have to understand, raising a troubled child is expensive. The emotional toll, the wear and tear on the house. I sacrificed my life for her." "You sacrificed nothing," Rowan said. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I saw my granddaughter today hauling water crates to earn a sandwich. While you have a diamond bracelet on your niece's wrist?" "That was a gift," Marla cried. "Purchased with a debit card linked to the trust on December 25th, Grant interjected. "We have the receipt." Marla went silent. She looked at the three of us. She realized the poor aunt act wasn't working. She sat up straighter, and the warmth evaporated from her face. She looked cold, calculating, and suddenly very dangerous. "You want to talk legalities?" Marla said. Her voice was different now, harder. "Fine. Let us talk legalities." She reached under the cushion of her chair, a strange place to keep documents. Or perhaps she had prepared for this and pulled out a folded piece of thick paper. "The trust allows for discretionary spending," she said. "But more importantly, I have this." She slid the paper across the table to Grant. 3 years ago," Marla said, her chin raised in defiance, "I petitioned the court. Given Camilla's instability and her refusal to adhere to household rules, the judge granted an emergency variance. It allows the guardian me to utilize the trust funds for general household maintenance and family stability, to ensure a safe environment for the beneficiary. regardless of her physical residence. Grant picked up the paper. Rowan leaned in to look. I watched their faces. Grant frowned. He adjusted his glasses. "This is a court order," he admitted. "Signed by Judge Anthony Sterling." "Exactly," Marla said, crossing her arms. "I have a court order saying I can spend that money to keep this house running, because this house is her only home. Whether she chooses to sleep here or in a gutter, everything I spent was legal, covered by the family stability clause." My heart stopped. If she had a judge's signature, then the theft wasn't theft. It was just sanctioned spending. I felt the walls closing in. Had she really outsmarted us? Was I going to lose again? Grant passed the paper to me. "Camila, look at this." I took the document. It looked terrifyingly official. It had a gold seal. It had a signature. It had the dense, impenetrable language of the law. Judicial Order for Variance of Trust Administration. Petitioner Marla Keene. Beneficiary Camila Knight. My eyes scanned the header. State of North Carolina. District Court of Pine Creek County. I froze. I read it again. Pine Creek County. "Grant," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Where is Pine Creek County?" "It is about 2 hours west of here," Grant said. "Why?" "I have never lived in Pine Creek County," I said, looking up at Marla. "And neither have you." "Marla." Marla's eye twitched. Just a tiny microscopic spasm. "We have a vacation rental there," Marla said quickly. "We established residency for tax purposes." "No," I said, pointing at the date on the document. "Look at the date. August 14th, 3 years ago." I looked at Rowan. August 14th. That was the day of the big hurricane that hit the coast. The entire state was in lockdown. The courts were closed for a week. I remember because we were boarded up in the basement without power. I turned the paper around and shoved it toward Marla. "How did you get a judge in a county we do not live in to sign a court order on a day when every government building in the state was underwater?" The room went dead silent. Grant snatched the paper back. He held it up to the light. "The seal," he muttered. "It is a sticker. It is not embossed into the fiber of the paper." He looked at Marla with a predatory grin. "This is a forgery, a high-quality one, but it is fake. And bringing a forged court order into a meeting with an officer of the court, that is a felony. Mrs. Keene." Marla's face turned the color of the marble floor. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She had overplayed her hand. She thought we were just angry relatives she could baffle with paperwork. She didn't expect us to check the dates. She didn't expect me to remember the hurricane. Rowan stood up. He buttoned his jacket. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. "We are done here," Rowan said. "I have seen enough." "You cannot prove that is fake," Marla stammered, standing up. "My lawyer will—" "Your lawyer will be very busy," Grant said, sliding the fake order into his briefcase. "I am keeping this as evidence." "Get out of my house," Marla screamed, the mask shattering completely. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. "Get out. You have no right." "It is not your house," I said quietly, looking her dead in the eye. "It never was." We walked to the door. I didn't look back at the luxury I had paid for. I just wanted to breathe fresh air. As we stepped onto the porch, Rowan stopped. He put a hand on my shoulder to guide me toward the car, but I paused. Through the large bay window, I could see back into the living room. Marla was not chasing us. She was not crying. She was standing in the middle of the room, phone in hand, typing furiously. Her thumbs moved with a desperate speed. She wasn't calling a lawyer. She was texting someone. Rowan followed my gaze. He saw it too. "She is warning him," Rowan said grimly. "Lance," I said. "Yes." Rowan nodded, his jaw setting hard. "We just kicked the hornet's nest. Lance knows we are here. He knows the cover story has failed." "What will he do?" I asked. Rowan opened the car door for me. "If he is the man I think he has become," Rowan said, He will try to burn everything down before we can get back to Chicago. We got into the car. As we pulled away, leaving the beautiful house and the ugly truth behind, I saw Marla watching us from the window. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked like a soldier waiting for reinforcements. The real war had just started. The adrenaline from the confrontation at Marla's house had faded, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension that filled the hotel suite. We were back in what Rowan called the command center, but it felt more like a wake. The beautiful view of the river outside was mocking us with its serenity, while our world was collapsing inward. Grant Holloway was pacing the room, holding the document Marla had tried to pass off as a shield. It was the court order, the one she claimed gave her permission to spend my trust fund on her own luxury lifestyle. Grant held it up to the light, squinting at the embossed seal, his lawyer's mind dismantling the lie piece by piece. "She is sloppy," Grant said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Arrogant people always get sloppy eventually. They start believing their own invincibility." He tossed the paper onto the coffee table. It landed with a soft slap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I ran the notary stamp," Grant said, looking at Rowan. "The name on the seal is Arthur P. Henderson. He was a licensed notary in Pine Creek County for 30 years. I asked, sensing the turn. "Mr. Henderson died of a stroke in February, 3 years ago," Grant said flatly. "This document is dated August 14th of that same year, unless Mr. Henderson came back from the grave specifically to help Marla Keene buy a new patio. This document is a complete fabrication." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was one thing to suspect Marla was a thief. It was another to see the proof of criminal forgery staring me in the face. She had not just stolen money, she had manufactured a legal reality to justify it. "It is a felony," Grant continued, "but it is also a thread. If she forged this, she didn't do it alone. Marla is a social climber, not a forger. She wouldn't know how to create a seal that passes a cursory visual inspection. She had help." Rowan was sitting at the desk in the corner, his back to us. He was hunched over his laptop, his shoulders rigid. He had been logging into the internal audit systems of Langford Industries for the last 20 minutes, his fingers flying across the keys with a desperate, angry energy. "Grant is right," Rowan said, his voice sounding hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "She had help, and it wasn't some street corner forger." Rowan turned his chair around. His face was gray. I had seen him look shocked before. Back at the camp, I had seen him look angry, but I had never seen him look like this. He looked broken. "I traced the override codes," Rowan said. "When the verification protocols on the trust were lowered 5 years ago, it required a dual-key authorization. One form from the guardian, one form from the trust administrator. We know this," Grant said, stepping closer. "We know it came from the 44th floor." "I know exactly whose terminal it came from," Rowan whispered. He looked at me, his eyes full of an apology so deep it hurt to look at him. "I gave this man the keys to my kingdom. Camilla, I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with your mother's legacy." He took a breath that rattled in his chest. Lance Whitmore. The name hung in the air. I didn't know who Lance Whitmore was, but the reaction from Grant told me everything. Grant stopped pacing. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of pure disbelief. "Lance," Grant repeated. "Your CFO, the man who has been running your family office for 20 years. 30, Rowan corrected. "We went to college together. He was the best man at my wedding. He is the godfather to my—" Rowan's voice broke. "He is the godfather to your mother." I sat down on the edge of the sofa, trying to process this. My poverty wasn't just the result of a greedy cousin, it was a conspiracy. It was a coordinated effort by the people at the very top of the food chain. Why, I asked, if he is the CFO of a billion-dollar company, why steal $3 million from a trust fund? It doesn't make sense. It is like stealing pennies. "Greed doesn't have a ceiling, Camilla," Grant said quietly, "but it usually has a reason. Gideon, Gideon Price, who had been silently working on a tablet in the corner, cleared his throat. He walked over to the television screen and cast a new set of documents onto the display. I followed the money leaving Marla's accounts, Gideon said. We know she spent a lot on herself, but about 40% of the withdrawals, nearly $1.2 million over 6 years, went to 2 specific vendors. He pointed to the screen. First, a company called Brenton Home Solutions. They did the renovations on Marla's house. Second, a firm called Apex Educational Consultants. They supposedly handled your private schooling curriculum. So, I asked. I pulled the corporate filings for both companies, Gideon said. Brenton Home Solutions is registered to a holding company in Delaware, but the primary signatory on the bank account is a man named David Whitmore. Rowan closed his eyes. Lance's brother. And Apex Educational Consultants, Gideon continued. It is owned by a woman named Sarah Jenkins. That is Lance Whitmore's wife's maiden name. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a deafening clarity. It wasn't just theft. It was a laundering operation. Marla was the extraction point. She pulled the money out, claiming it was for me. Then she paid these vendors for services that never happened or were grossly inflated. The money flowed from my trust, through Marla, and right back into the pockets of Lance Whitmore's family. Marla got the house and the lifestyle. Lance got the cash, and I got the homeless shelter. Rowan stood up and walked to the window. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. I built this system, he murmured. I hired the auditors. I set up the checks and balances, and the man I put in charge of watching the door was the one letting the wolves in. He turned to me. I am so sorry. Camila, I thought I was protecting you by keeping my distance, but I just left you alone in a room with sharks. I looked at the screen, at the flow charts showing my life being siphoned away dollar by dollar. I didn't feel like crying. I felt a strange, cold detachment. You know what is funny? I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. For years, I thought I was just bad at life. I thought I wasn't working hard enough. I thought I wasn't smart enough to get the scholarships. I blamed myself every time I couldn't pay the rent. I thought it was my fault. I stood up and walked over to the chart. I traced the line of a transaction dated 2 years ago, $5,000 for consulting. That was the same month I had eaten expired canned soup for a week because I had $0 in my bank account. But I wasn't failing, I said, my voice hardening. I was being erased. They wrote a script for my life where I was the loser, and they were the winners. They decided I would be poor so they could be rich. I turned to Rowan. I am not sad. Grandfather, I am furious, and I want to take the pen back. Rowan straightened up. The grief on his face was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He looked like the titan of industry he was supposed to be. We are going to do more than take the pen back, Rowan said. We are going to burn the book. Grant, Rowan commanded. What is our next move? We need to stop the bleeding immediately, Grant said, shifting into attack mode. Now that Marla knows we are onto her, she has alerted Lance. They will try to liquidate. They will try to move the money to accounts in the Caymans or Switzerland where we can't touch it. I need to file for an emergency temporary restraining order on all assets linked to the trust. Marla Keene, and now, Lance Whitmore. Do it, Rowan said. Wake up a judge if you have to. I am drafting the motion now, Grant said, his fingers already flying across his laptop keyboard. But we have a problem. Lance is powerful. He has his own lawyers. If he gets wind of the freeze before it is executed, he could tie this up in court for years while the money disappears. He won't have years, Rowan said. He won't even have hours. Just then, Rowan's phone buzzed on the desk. It was a singular, jarring vibration in the tense room. Rowan looked down at the screen. His expression froze. Speak of the devil, Rowan whispered. He turned the phone so we could see the caller ID. It read simply, Lance. My heart hammered in my chest. He is calling you, why? He knows, Gideon said. Marla texted him the second we left her house. He knows the game is up. Answer it, Grant said sharply. Put it on speaker. Do not agree to anything. Just listen. We need to know what his play is. Rowan took a deep breath. He picked up the phone and tapped the speaker icon. He set it down on the table as if it were a bomb that might explode. Hello? Lance? Rowan said. His voice was steady, giving away nothing of the storm raging inside him. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that stretched for 5 seconds. Then, a voice spoke. It was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who drank scotch in leather armchairs. But there was a crack in it, a slight tremor of exhaustion. Rowan, Lance said, I assume you enjoyed your trip to North Carolina. It was educational, Rowan replied coldly. I learned a lot about the cost of renovations these days. Lance let out a short, dry chuckle. It sounded like dry leaves being crushed. Marla always did have expensive taste. I told her to be more discreet, but you know how she is. She never could resist a spotlight. Is that what this is, Lance? Rowan asked, his voice rising slightly. A critique of her spending habits. You stole $3 million from my granddaughter. You forged my signature. You betrayed me. It is more complicated than that, Rowan, Lance said. It is always more complicated than the numbers on a spreadsheet. There is nothing complicated about theft, Rowan snapped. I need to see you, Lance said. Not in the office, not with the lawyers, just you and me, like the old days. We are past the old days, Rowan said. I am standing here with my attorney and the granddaughter you helped starve. If you have something to say it to the police. You don't want to do that, Lance said softly. Trust me, Rowan, you do not want the police involved yet, not until you hear what I have to say. Give me one reason why I shouldn't destroy you right now, Rowan demanded. Because you don't know the whole story, Lance said. You think this started with Marla? You think this started with a greedy cousin wanting a new kitchen? The line went silent again. I could hear Lance breathing on the other end. I am at the airstrip in Chicago. Rowan lied. I am coming for you. Come to the boathouse, Lance said, where we used to go after the board meetings. Meet me there in 4 hours, alone. And if I don't, Rowan asked, then you will never know the truth, Lance said. And frankly, Rowan, you owe it to your daughter to hear the truth. Rowan flinched as if he had been slapped. Mentioning my mother was a low blow, and Lance knew it. I will be there, Rowan said through gritted teeth. Good, Lance said. Lance, Rowan said, just before he hung up. Why? That is all I want to know. Why you? There was a long pause. When Lance spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper, cold and chilling. You think you are the victim here, Rowan, but you are not. You don't understand. Understand what? Rowan asked. This didn't start with me stealing your money, Lance said, delivering the words with a terrifying finality. This started with your family. It started with what you did 20 years ago. I was just balancing the ledger. The line went dead. Rowan stared at the phone. The color had drained from his face completely. What I did 20 years ago, Rowan whispered to himself. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a new kind of fear. We had thought we were chasing a thief, but now, it felt like we had just walked into a trap that had been set before I was even born. We are going back to Chicago, Rowan said, grabbing his jacket. Now. Rowan, you cannot go meet him alone, Grant argued. It is dangerous. Rowan turned to look at us. His eyes were haunted. I have to, he said. Because if he is right, if this is about the past, then I am not just the judge in this case. I might be the defendant. Grant Holloway slammed his hand onto the marble desktop, the sound cracking through the heavy silence of the hotel suite like a gavel. You are not going to the boathouse, Rowan, Grant said. His voice was not a request. It was a command. This is not a noir film. You do not meet a man who just admitted to embezzling $3 million in a secluded location at night. That is how people disappear. Rowan was standing by the door, his hand still gripping the handle of his luggage. The rage was radiating off him in waves. But he stopped. He looked at me, then at Grant. The primal need to confront Lance was warring with the cold logic that had made him a billionaire. "He wants to talk," Rowan said through gritted teeth. "He said he has the truth. He has a narrative," Grant corrected, stepping between Rowan and the door. "He is scared. He is trying to get you alone so he can manipulate you. Or worse, if we play this his way, we lose. We bring him to us. We control the environment. We control the recording devices." I stood up. "Grant is right. Grandfather, if you go there angry, you might do something that puts you in jail, and then Marla wins." Rowan looked at me, and the tension in his shoulders finally broke. He let go of the suitcase. "Fine, set it up, but I want to look him in the eye." Grant wasted no time. He made a call to a private arbitration firm in downtown Chicago, securing a soundproof conference room for the next morning. Then he called Lance back. I didn't hear what Lance said, but I heard Grant's voice cold, professional, leaving no room for negotiation. The meeting was set, neutral ground, no weapons, no secrets. The next 12 hours were a blur of strategy. Grant did not sleep. He sat at the table with Gideon, building a wall of paper. Every bank transfer, every forged signature, every questionable invoice was cataloged and indexed. They were building a cage, bar by bar. When we walked into the conference room the next morning, the air was sterile and cold. The table was long, polished mahogany. On one side sat Rowan, Grant, and me. On the other side, waiting for us, was Lance Whitmore. I had never seen him before, but I knew his type immediately. He was 60-something, tanned, wearing a suit that cost more than the house I grew up in. He looked like the kind of man who played golf on Tuesdays and decided the fate of thousands of employees over a scotch. But up close, the cracks were visible. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands, resting on the table, had a slight tremor. He didn't look at me. He looked only at Rowan. "I am glad you came to your senses," Lance said, his voice smooth but lacking its usual weight. "This doesn't need to be a public spectacle. Rowan, it became a spectacle when you stole from a child," Rowan said. His voice was deadly calm, a terrifying contrast to his rage the night before. Lance sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. "I didn't steal. I reallocated. The liquidity was necessary for parallel investments. The plan was always to return the principal before the trust fully matured." "You spent it," Grant interrupted, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a summary of the transfers to his brother's shell company. "You funneled $1.2 million into your family's pockets. That is not reallocation. Mr. Whitmore, that is theft." Lance didn't even look at the paper. He leaned forward, locking eyes with Rowan. "Let us cut the legal posturing," Lance said. "Here is the offer. I will liquidate my personal holdings. I will wire $1.5 million back into the trust by Monday morning. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement. You drop the internal audit, and I resign quietly for health reasons. No press, no police. The girl gets her money back, and the Langford reputation remains spotless." I stared at him. He was trying to buy his way out of a felony with half the money he stole. "And the other half?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Lance finally looked at me. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if the furniture had started speaking. "The rest was spent by your aunt. You can chase her for it. I am offering you a clean exit. Young lady, take the money. Restart your life. Do not ask questions you do not want the answers to." Rowan's fist clenched on the table. "You are admitting to the misappropriation of funds," Grant said, his voice level. "You are offering restitution in exchange for silence. That is an admission of guilt." "It is a settlement," Lance corrected sharply, "and it is the best one you are going to get. If you drag this into court, Rowan, I will drag everything out. Every skeleton in the Langford closet, every corner we cut in the 80s, every regulator we paid off in the 90s. Do you really want that? Do you want your granddaughter to know exactly where her inheritance came from?" The room went silent. It was blackmail, pure and simple. Rowan looked at his old friend. He looked at the man who had stood by him at his daughter's funeral, and in that moment, whatever bond had existed between them snapped. "Grant," Rowan said softly. "Yes, sir." "Decline the offer." Lance's eyes widened. "Rowan, be reasonable." "I am done being reasonable," Rowan said, standing up. "I don't care about the reputation. I don't care about the past. I care about her." He pointed at me. "Keep your money. Lance, you are going to need it for your legal defense." We walked out. Lance was left sitting at the table, his mouth slightly open, the arrogance finally replaced by fear. As soon as the heavy oak doors closed behind us, Grant pulled out his phone. That was the mistake we needed. He offered a settlement. He admitted he had control of the funds. "I am filing the ex parte motion now." "Do it," Rowan said. Grant tapped the screen furiously as we walked down the hall. "I am requesting a forensic accountant be appointed by the court immediately. I am filing for a temporary restraining order on Marla Keene's assets and a suspension of Lance Whitmore's fiduciary powers pending investigation. The judge is on standby. We will have the freeze in place within the hour." We thought we had struck the killing blow. We were wrong. By the time we got back to the hotel, the counterattack had already started. But it wasn't legal. It was social. "Turn on the TV," Gideon said the moment we walked in. He was pointing at the local news channel. I looked at the screen and felt my stomach drop. There was Marla, standing on her front lawn, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. A microphone was shoved in her face. "I am just heartbroken," Marla was saying to the camera, her voice trembling perfectly. "We raised Camila like our own daughter. We gave her everything, but she has always been troubled. She ran away to live in that camp. We tried to bring her home, and now her grandfather shows up after 20 years of abandonment. He never visited, he never called, and suddenly he wants to control her money. He is using her to get to the trust. He is bullying a single mother who just tried to do her best." The reporter turned to the camera. "A family torn apart by greed. Is this a rescue mission or a hostile takeover?" Reporting live from Lake Brenton. "She is spinning it," I whispered. "She is making herself the victim." "She is smart," Grant said grimly. "She knows she can't win in court, so she is trying to win in the court of public opinion. She is trying to shame you into backing down." My phone started buzzing. Notifications from social media, people finding my old profiles, strangers commenting, "Ungrateful brat. Your aunt looks so nice. Why are you doing this rich people problems?" Rowan looked devastated. "I did abandon you," he said, sinking onto the sofa. "She is right about that. Everyone will believe her." "No," I said. I felt a surge of cold anger. I was done being defined by other people. Marla had written my story for 18 years. Lance had written my financial ruin. I wasn't going to let them write the ending. "I am going downstairs," I said. "Camila, no," Grant warned. "Do not engage with the press." "I am not engaging," I said. "I am correcting." I walked out of the suite, took the elevator down to the lobby, and walked out the front doors. There was a small cluster of reporters who had tracked us down. When they saw me, they swarmed. I didn't hide. I didn't put on sunglasses. I stood on the steps of the hotel, wearing the simple clothes Rowan had bought me. I waited for them to quiet down. "My name is Camila Knight," I said. My voice shook for a second, then steadied. "I am not a victim, and I am not a pawn. For 6 years, I lived in poverty while a trust fund in my name paid for vacations I never took and schools I never attended. I do not want fame. I do not want pity. I just want to know why the people who were supposed to protect me decided to rob me instead, and I will trust the court to find that answer. Thank you." I turned and walked back inside. I didn't answer questions. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. When I got back to the room, Rowan was looking at me with awe. "You are so much like your mother," he whispered. But the moment of victory was short-lived. My phone buzzed again. I thought it was another hate comment, but when I looked at the screen, I froze. It was a text message from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. Do not tell Marla I texted you. Then a second message. She is freaking out. She knows about the freeze order coming. She is at the title company right now. She is selling the lake house to a cash buyer. Quick close. She is dumping it for half price to get the money and run. I stared at the screen. Who is this? I texted back. Sloan, the girl with the diamond bracelet. The girl who had taken my spot at the private school. Grant, I yelled. Grant, look at this. I shoved the phone into his hands. Grant read the text, and his face went pale. The lake house, Grant said. It is the only asset she has that is not technically in the trust's name. She bought it under a different LLC. But we know she used trust funds for the down payment. If she sells it for cash today, that is $600,000 that disappears into the wind. She is at the title company now, I said. Can we stop it? We have minutes, Grant said. He grabbed his laptop. I need the address of the title company. Gideon. Find out where she is closing. Gideon's fingers flew across his keyboard. There are 3 major title agencies in Lake Brenton. I am checking real estate listings. Wait. Here. A listing for a lakefront property just went pending 10 minutes ago. The closing agent is listed as Landmark Title Services. Get me the number for Landmark Title, Grant barked. And get Judge Sterling on the line. I need an emergency injunction specifically naming that property. The room exploded into activity. It was a race. Marla was trying to cash out her chips before the casino closed. Grant got the title company on speakerphone. This is Grant Holloway, attorney for the Langford estate. I am advising you that the property at 44 Lakeview Drive is currently subject to active litigation regarding fraudulent funds. If you proceed with this closing, your agency will be named as a co-conspirator in a federal embezzlement case. The woman on the other end sputtered. Sir, we have the seller right here. The paperwork is signed. Has the wire been sent? Grant demanded. Has the buyer's money left escrow? I am initiating the transfer now, the woman stammered. Stop. Grant shouted. Do not press that button. I have a court order coming through your fax machine in 30 seconds. If you move that money, you will lose your license and you will go to prison. Do you understand me? There was a terrifying silence on the line. I could hear muffled shouting in the background. It sounded like Marla. She was screaming at them to send the money. Ms. Keene is very insisted, the agent said, her voice shaking. Ms. Keene is a desperate woman, Grant said coldly. Check your fax machine. We waited. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, the longest seconds of my life. Then, the agent's voice came back. I have received the document. It is signed by Judge Sterling. She paused. I am canceling the wire. The closing is terminated. We heard a scream from the other end of the line, a raw, primal scream of rage. Then the line went dead. I sank into a chair, letting out a breath I had been holding for 5 minutes. We had stopped her. She is trapped, Rowan said. She has no cash. Her accounts are frozen. The house sale is blocked. She is cornered, Grant agreed. I looked down at my phone. The text thread with Sloan was still open. Thank you. I typed. 3 dots appeared, then a reply. She is going to destroy everything. Camilla, I don't want to go to jail. I just wanted to go to school. I didn't know she was stealing it all until today. I looked at the message. Sloan wasn't the villain I thought she was. She was just another prop in Marla's play, dressed in better costumes but just as controlled. She was terrified, and a terrified witness was exactly what we needed. Grant, I said, showing him the new message. I don't think we need to drag Sloan down with her. I think she wants to flip. Grant read the message and a slow, sharp smile spread across his face. Well then, Grant said, let us give her a lifeboat. If Sloan testifies, Marla doesn't just lose the money. She loses her freedom. The courtroom was not the dramatic, mahogany-paneled theater I had seen in movies. It was a sterile, fluorescent-lit room in the county municipal building that smelled faintly of floor wax and stale coffee. There was no jury today, just Judge Sterling, a man with a face carved from granite and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. We sat on the left, Rowan, Grant, and me. On the right sat Marla and her attorney, a man with a shiny suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind them, sitting separately as if trying to distance himself physically from the shipwreck, was Lance Whitmore and his own legal team. This was not a trial yet. It was an evidentiary hearing. A hearing to decide if there was enough smoke to warrant burning down the house. Judge Sterling opened the file, looking bored. We are here to review the motion for an emergency asset freeze regarding the Langford Trust. The plaintiff alleges mismanagement. The defense alleges, well, from what I read, a misunderstanding of family expenses. He looked over his glasses at Grant. Mr. Holloway, usually these disputes are handled in mediation. Why are we wasting the court's time on a Tuesday morning? Grant stood up. He didn't button his jacket. He didn't use big words. He simply walked to the bench and placed a single document on the ledge. Because, Your Honor, Grant said, his voice calm and carrying to the back of the room, this is not a dispute about how much allowance a teenager should get. This is about a systemic, decade-long fraud that began with a dead man's stamp. The judge frowned and picked up the paper. It was the court order Marla had shown us. This document, Grant continued, purports to be an order from this very court, signed 3 years ago, authorizing Mrs. Keene to divert trust funds for her personal home renovation. It bears the notary seal of Arthur P. Henderson. The judge squinted at the seal. I knew Artie Henderson. Good man. Yes, Grant said. He was a good man, and he was also a dead man at the time this document was notarized. Mr. Henderson passed away 6 months prior to the date on that page. The silence that followed was absolute. Marla didn't move. She stared straight ahead. Her chin lifted in a defiant angle, but I saw her throat bob as she swallowed. That is a serious accusation, Counselor, Judge Sterling said, his boredom vanishing instantly. We have the death certificate attached as Exhibit B, Grant said. And we have a handwriting expert's analysis of the judge's signature on that order. It is a trace forgery, a bad one. The judge looked at Marla's lawyer. Counsel. Marla's lawyer stood up, looking flustered. Your Honor, my client was under the impression the document was legitimate. She utilized a third-party service to handle the paperwork. If there was an error, she is a victim of fraud, not the perpetrator. An error, I whispered to Rowan. She calls a dead notary an error. Rowan placed a hand on my arm. His grip was warm and steady. Watch, he whispered. They are flailing. Grant didn't let up. He called our first witness the forensic accountant appointed by the court just 24 hours ago, a woman named Ms. Cheng, who looked like she ate spreadsheets for breakfast. Ms. Cheng, Grant asked, in your preliminary review of the trust's outflows, did you find educational expenses? I did, Ms. Cheng replied, consulting her laptop. Over the last 4 years, approximately $200,000 was paid to Apex Educational Consultants and directly to St. Jude's Preparatory Academy. And did the beneficiary, Camilla Knight, attend these institutions? No. Ms. Cheng said, I cross-referenced the Social Security numbers on the student transcripts attached to the invoices. The student listed is Sloan Keene. I looked over at Marla. She was whispering furiously to her lawyer. So, Grant said, turning to the judge, the trust paid for a private education, just not for the person named on the trust. Objection, Marla's lawyer shouted. Mrs. Keene has guardianship rights. The trust allows for family maintenance. Sloan Keene is part of the household. Raising one child elevates the standard of living for the other. It is a rising tide lifts all boats argument. The beneficiary was not in the boat, Grant shot back. The beneficiary was drowning. Grant called me to the stand. Walking to the witness box felt like walking through deep water. I swore to tell the truth, sat down, and looked at the room. I saw Marla looking at me with those sad, puppy dog eyes. She used to manipulate everyone. Don't do this, Camilla. Her eyes seemed to say, we are family. I looked away. Ms. Knight, Grant asked gently, did you receive any financial support from the Langford Trust for your education? No, I said. I applied for federal financial aid when I was 18. I was denied because the system showed I had significant assets in a trust, but I couldn't access the trust, so I took out private loans with 20% interest to pay for community college classes. Did you finish? No, I said. I couldn't afford the books. I dropped out after one semester to work full-time at a warehouse. And your living situation? I paid rent to my aunt for a room in the basement until I was 18. I said, then I moved out. I have lived in 3 different apartments, a car, and recently, a relief shelter. Did Mrs. Keene ever offer you money from the trust? She told me the trust was empty, I said, looking directly at Marla. She said my grandfather had stopped sending money. She said we were broke and that I needed to pull my own weight. Marla let out a dramatic sob. I was trying to teach her responsibility. I wanted her to be independent. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Keene, you will remain silent. She claims she spent the money on the family, Grant said, pivoting to the screen where he projected a new set of bank statements. Let us look at that family spending. The list scrolled down. It was nauseating. $4,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue, $6,000 for a wellness retreat in Sedona, $8,000 for a first-class trip to Italy. Ms. Knight, Grant asked me, did you go to Italy? I have never left the country, I said. I do not even have a passport. Did you go to Sedona? No. Did you ever see any of these items? I saw the bags, I said. Marla told me she bought them at a thrift store. She said she was good at finding bargains. A ripple of laughter went through the back of the room. It wasn't funny to me. It was pathetic. Marla's lawyer stood up again. Your Honor, while these expenditures may seem extravagant, they do not constitute criminal abuse. There is no evidence of physical neglect. Ms. Knight was fed. She was housed until she chose to leave. This is a civil dispute about the interpretation of maintenance, not a criminal case. The judge looked thoughtful. Counsel makes a point. Mr. Holloway, mismanaging funds is one thing, theft is another. Mrs. Keene had broad discretionary powers under the original trust agreement. She did, Grant said, but Mr. Lance Whitmore did not. The air in the room changed. Lance, who had been looking at his watch, suddenly froze. Grant clicked a button. A new graphic appeared on the screen. It showed a flow of money leaving the trust, going into Marla's account, and then immediately bouncing out to a third party. We found a recurring transfer, Grant said. $50,000, every quarter, sent to an entity called the Beacon Light Fund. It is registered as a nonprofit charity. My client is a philanthropist, Lance's lawyer said lazily. The Beacon Light Fund, Grant continued, ignoring the interruption, has no employees, it has no office, it has no website. Its registered address is a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware, and the registered agent for this fund is a corporate entity owned by Mr. Lance Whitmore's brother-in-law. Rowan stiffened beside me. This was the smoking gun. This was the proof that Lance wasn't just letting Marla steal. He was taking a cut. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. Please take the stand. Lance walked up. He didn't look like a titan of industry anymore. He looked like a man trying to remember a lie he told 10 years ago. Mr. Whitmore, Grant asked, you were the fiduciary administrator for the Langford Trust. You had oversight. Did you approve these transfers to the Beacon Light Fund? I approve thousands of transactions a week, Lance said smoothly, adjusting his tie. I rely on my team to vet the details. If there was an oversight, it was a clerical error. A clerical error that funneled $200,000 a year into your family's pocket, Grant asked. I have no knowledge of the ownership of that fund. Lance lied. I support many charities. Let us talk about approvals then, Grant said. He pulled up the digital signature log. 5 years ago, the oversight protocols were removed. The document authorizing this removal required the signature of the grantor Rowan Langford. Grant zoomed in on the signature. Is that Rowan Langford's signature? Lance hesitated. It looks like it. Did you witness him sign it? I believe I did. It was a busy time. We handled a lot of paperwork. You are lying, Rowan said from the table. He didn't shout. He just said it. Order, the judge warned. But he was looking at Lance. Mr. Whitmore, Grant said. We pulled the metadata from the digital pen used to sign this document. The biometric pressure data, it matches your signing profile, not Mr. Langford's, and the timestamp shows it was signed at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. At that exact moment, flight records show Rowan Langford was in the air, flying to Tokyo. He could not have signed it. Lance went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The clerical error defense had just evaporated. He had been caught forging his boss's signature to facilitate his own embezzlement. I was acting as his proxy, Lance stammered. We had a verbal understanding. He told me to handle it. You do not handle a $3 million trust modification with a verbal understanding, Judge Sterling snapped. He looked at Lance with pure disdain. You breached your fiduciary duty. You engaged in self-dealing, and you lied to this court. The judge slammed the file shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I have heard enough for the preliminary motion, Judge Sterling said. I am granting the plaintiff's request in full. All assets belonging to Marla Keene, including the real estate in Lake Brenton, are frozen effective immediately. The accounts of the Beacon Light Fund are frozen, and Mr. Whitmore. He peered over his glasses. I am issuing an order to suspend your powers over any financial instrument related to the Langford estate. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing, specifically the evidence regarding the notary seal and the digital forgery, to the district attorney's office for an investigation into wire fraud and identity theft. Marla let out a gasp. She slumped back in her chair, her hand flying to her mouth. Court is adjourned, the judge said. We stood up. I felt lightheaded. It wasn't over, there would be a trial. There would be more fighting, but the dam had broken. The truth was out. As we filed out of the courtroom, Marla passed by us. She held her head high, clutching her designer purse like a shield. She looked at me with a mix of hatred and disbelief, as if she still couldn't understand how the girl she had stepped on for years had finally bitten back. You are ungrateful, she hissed as she passed. After everything I did. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. But as she turned to walk down the hallway, her phone started to vibrate in her hand. It was a relentless, angry buzzing. She looked down at the screen, and for the first time, I saw the crack in her armor. Her hand was shaking, not a little tremble, but a violent, uncontrollable shake. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide with terror. It wasn't a lawyer calling. It wasn't a friend. Who is calling her? Rowan asked quietly, watching her. I don't know, I said, watching Marla hurry toward the exit, almost tripping in her heels. But whoever it is, she is more afraid of them than she is of the judge. The walls are falling, Grant said, packing his briefcase. And the rats are starting to turn on each other. I watched Marla disappear through the revolving doors. She looked small. She looked desperate. And for the first time in 18 years, I wasn't the one running away. Let us go get some lunch, I said to Rowan. I think I can finally afford it, Rowan smiled. But his eyes were still on the door where Lance had exited moments before, surrounded by his legal team. Lunch, Rowan agreed. And then, we find out who else was in the room when Lance decided to sell my family out. The war was supposed to be fought in the courtroom, but the enemy was trying to end it in the back alleys of legal negotiation. 2 days after the evidentiary hearing, a courier arrived at our hotel suite. He carried a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with the insignia of a law firm I did not recognize. It was not Lance Whitmore's usual defense team. This was a fixer firm, the kind you hired when you wanted a problem to vanish without a paper trail. Grant opened it. He read the contents in silence, his eyebrows knitting together. Then, he slid the document across the table to me. "It is a settlement offer," Grant said. "From Lance, but it is not for the trust. It is for you personally." I looked at the paper. It was a non-disclosure agreement. The terms were simple. In exchange for my signature, which would legally bind me to never speak about Lance Whitmore, the trust, or the alleged fraud to the press, or any government agency, I would receive a direct wire transfer, $500,000, $500,000. For a girl who had been recycling aluminum cans to buy bus fare 3 weeks ago, the number on the page looked like a phone number. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to disappear. Rowan was sitting across from me. He looked older today. The fight was draining him, pulling the color from his skin. He looked at the number. Then he looked at me. "It is a lot of money, Camilla," Rowan said softly. I looked up, surprised. "You want me to take it?" "I want you to be safe," Rowan said. His voice was heavy with fatigue. "Litigation takes years. Lance has resources we have not even seen yet. He could drag this out until you are 30. He could smear your name in every paper in the country. This ends the noise. You take the money. You go to school. You live your life." He was giving me an out. He was offering to swallow his own pride and his own justice just to make sure I did not have to fight anymore. It was the first time in my life a family member had put my well-being above their own ego. I looked at the check. Then I looked at the NDA. I remembered the cold nights in the warehouse. I remembered the hunger. I remembered Marla's fake smile and Lance's arrogant dismissal. "No," I said. I pushed the paper back toward Grant. "Camilla, think about it," Rowan urged gently. "I have thought about it," I said, my voice rising. "For 18 years, I lived inside a contract I never signed. Marla made the rules, Lance kept the score, and I was just the piece on the board they moved around. If I sign this, I am just signing another contract where they own me. I am selling my voice for $500,000. I stood up, feeling a fire in my chest that burned hotter than the shame of poverty ever had. "I am not signing," I said. "I do not want his hush money. I want him to stand in front of a judge and admit what he did. Rejection sent." Grant smiled, a sharp, shark-like expression of approval. "I was hoping you would say that. I will draft the refusal, and I will make sure it is blistering." But Lance was not the only one trying to cut a deal. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Sloan. "Meet me in the lobby. 5 minutes. Come alone. I have it." I went down. I found Sloan sitting in a high-backed armchair in the far corner of the lobby, wearing dark sunglasses and a hoodie. She looked terrified. She kept checking the entrance, as if she expected Marla to burst through the doors with a shotgun. When she saw me, she didn't say hello. She just slid a USB drive across the small coffee table. "What is this?" I asked. "Insurance," Sloan whispered. "I recorded it 2 days ago, after the hearing. Marla was drunk. She was on the phone with her sister. And just listen to it," Sloan said. She stood up, her hands shaking. "I am not going to jail for her. Camilla, I just wanted to go to fashion school. I didn't know she was laundering money until the FBI started asking questions about the house." She turned to leave, then paused. "She is going to blame Lance," Sloan said rapidly. "She is building a file claiming Lance masterminded the whole thing and forced her to go along with it. She says she was a victim of financial coercion." I stared at her. "And Lance? Lance is doing the same thing," Sloan said grimly. I heard him yelling on the phone. "He is claiming Marla seduced him into the scheme, that she manipulated him with sob stories about the family. They are eating each other. Camilla. And they do not care who gets caught in the crossfire." Sloan hurried away, vanishing into the revolving doors. I took the drive back to the suite. Gideon plugged it into his secure laptop. We all gathered around. The audio file opened. The sound quality was grainy, clearly recorded from a phone in a pocket or a purse, but Marla's voice was unmistakable. It was slurred, angry, and distinct. "Lance thinks he can cut me out. I am the one who took the risk. I am the one who had to look that little brat in the face every day and tell her we were broke, while I was wearing a $5,000 watch. I earned every penny of that money. The trust pays for the house. The trust pays for the cars. The trust pays for everything. And Camila. She is too stupid to figure it out. She thinks she is just unlucky. There was a pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. If Lance tries to settle, I will burn him. I have the emails where he told me how to structure the fake consulting invoices. I will tell the feds everything. I will say he threatened me. Who are they going to believe? A crying single mother or a corporate shark? The recording ended. The room was silent. Well, Grant said, leaning back in his chair, that certainly simplifies things. She admits to the theft, Rowan said, his face hard. She admits to the conspiracy, and she admits to the intent to frame Lance. It is the golden ticket, Grant said. We do not just have financial irregularities anymore. We have a confession, and we have proof of a criminal conspiracy between the guardian and the administrator. Grant wasted no time. He filed an emergency motion to compel immediately. He used the recording redacting the parts about me being stupid to spare my dignity in the public record to force Marla to provide the source of funds for every major asset she owned. The court order came down like a hammer. By the afternoon, the sheriff's deputies were at the house in Lake Brenton. We watched it on the news. They were putting seizure tape on the doors. They were towing the Range Rover. They were freezing the contents of the house. Marla was out. She had been staying at a motel near the highway, trying to evade the press. But her castle had been confiscated. But the victory felt hollow for Rowan. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a technical schematic of his company's accounting software. He had been digging for days, trying to understand how Lance had hidden the money for so long without triggering the automated fraud alerts. I found it, Rowan said. His voice was dead. I walked over. Found what? The silence, Rowan said. I always wondered why I never got an email. Why the system never flagged the fact that the withdrawals were matching the deposit dates exactly, which is a classic sign of laundering. He pointed to a line of code on the screen. Lance didn't just ignore the alerts, Rowan said. He went into the back end of the family office server. He wrote a specific exception rule. Any transaction tagged with the beneficiary code CK Trust was automatically routed to a hidden archive folder. The system was screaming for 5 years. Camila, but Lance cut the wire to the speaker. It was a level of betrayal that went beyond greed. It was calculated, technical malice. Lance had used his intimate knowledge of Rowan's own company to blind him. I looked at my grandfather. He looked small. He looked like a man who was questioning every relationship he had ever had. Rowan, I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. If you had checked, I asked quietly. It was the question that had been burning a hole in my heart for weeks. If you had just called me, or visited, instead of trusting the emails, instead of trusting Lance, would I still have lost 6 years of my life? Rowan didn't flinch. He didn't make an excuse. He didn't blame Marla's lies or Lance's code. No, Rowan said. You wouldn't have. If I had been a grandfather instead of a checkbook, you would have been safe. This is on me. Camila, all of it. I let my grief for your mother become a wall, and I let the thieves stand guard on top of it. He reached out and took my hand. I cannot give you those 6 years back, he whispered. I would give every dollar I have if I could, but I can promise you that for the next 60 years, no one will ever silence you again. I squeezed his hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The next day, Marla was deposed. It was a closed-door session, but we were allowed to be there. Marla sat at the end of the table, looking nothing like the polished socialite of Lake Brenton. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore no makeup. She looked tired, haggard, and desperate. When Grant played the recording, the one Sloan had given us, Marla didn't scream. She didn't deny it. She started to cry. But it wasn't the fake, theatrical crying she had done on the news. This was the weeping of a trapped animal. I just wanted stability, Marla sobbed, slamming her hand on the table. You don't understand. My husband left me with nothing. I had debt. I had a mortgage. And then this money, it was just sitting there, millions of dollars for a child who didn't even know it existed. Why should she have it all? Why should she live like a princess while I struggled? She looked at me, her eyes pleading. I didn't hate you, Camila. I really didn't. I needed the money more than you did. You were young. You could work. I was drowning. I looked at her. I listened to her justification. She felt entitled to my life because she had failed at hers. You didn't just take the money, Marla, I said, my voice steady. You took my future. You watched me starve. You watched me cry over rent. And you went to Paris. I took you in, Marla screamed. I gave you a roof. You gave me a cage, I corrected. Grant closed his folder. We have the confession on record. We have the forensic trail. And now we have the motive. He turned to Marla's lawyer, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. We are moving for summary judgment, Grant said, and we are forwarding this deposition to the district attorney. This is grand larceny, fraud, and embezzlement. Your client is looking at 10 to 15 years. Marla stopped crying. The reality of the number hit her. 10 years. Lance made me do it, she whispered, playing her final card. He told me how. He set it up. We know, Grant said coolly, and he says you made him do it. You can argue about who started the fire while you are both sitting in a cell. We walked out of the deposition room into the bright hallway. The air felt cleaner, lighter. Grant turned to us. He looked satisfied. We have them, Grant said. Between Sloane's recording, the tech audit, and Marla's breakdown, we have enough to bypass a long trial. The judge is likely to issue a summary judgment to restore the trust. Restore it? I asked. But the money is gone. They spent it. They spent the liquid cash, Grant corrected. But we have seized the house. We have seized Lance's investment accounts. We have seized the shell company assets. We will liquidate everything they own. It might take a few months, but we will make the trust whole. You will get your $3 million back. Camila, maybe even more with damages. I looked out the window at the city skyline. I thought about the $3 million. It was just a number. It couldn't buy back the nights I slept in the car. It couldn't buy back the degree I never got, but it could buy something else. I don't care about the number, I said to Rowan. I just want it to be over. Rowan nodded. It is almost over. The checkbook is closed. The grandfather is here. We walked down the hall, leaving the lawyers to argue over the scraps of Marla's life. We had won the war. Now, I just had to figure out what to do with the peace. The final gavel did not sound like a thunderclap. It sounded like a dry wooden period at the end of a very long, very ugly sentence. We were back in Judge Sterling's courtroom for the final disposition. The air was different today. The frantic energy of the evidentiary hearing was gone. Replaced by the heavy bureaucratic weight of consequence, there was no more screaming, no more desperate pleas from Marla about family unity. There was only the rustling of paper and the drone of the court stenographer. Judge Sterling read the summary judgment with a voice that lacked all emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying. The court finds by clear and convincing evidence, Sterling read, peering over his spectacles, that the defendant, Marla Keene, engaged in a systematic pattern of fraud, misappropriation of funds, and breach of fiduciary duty. The evidence of forged court documents and misappropriated educational funds is irrefutable. He turned a page. Furthermore, the court finds that the co-defendant, Lance Whitmore, utilized his professional position to facilitate this fraud, actively suppressing internal audit controls to conceal the theft. This was not negligence. It was architecture. I sat very still. I had expected to feel a surge of joy, a rush of vindication that would make me want to jump up and cheer, but I did not feel like cheering. I felt a profound, exhausting sense of relief. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack after walking for 1,000 miles. My shoulders felt lighter, but my muscles still ached from the journey. The judge looked at Marla. She was sitting alone at her table. Her high-priced lawyer was still there, but he had physically distanced himself, leaning away from her as if failure was contagious. Marla was not crying today. She looked hollowed out. The Botox and the fillers that had kept her looking young seemed to have failed overnight. She looked every minute of her age. "Marla Keene," the judge said, "you are hereby stripped of all guardianship rights. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $3,400,000, as the liquid cash is no longer available. The court orders the immediate seizure and liquidation of all personal property, including the residence at Lake Brenton, the vehicle, and any investment accounts in your name." Marla flinched. The house was gone. The jewelry was gone. The fake life she had built on my back was being dismantled, brick by brick. "The district attorney," the judge added, "has indicated that criminal indictments for forgery and grand larceny will be filed by the end of the week. I suggest you get your affairs in order. Mrs. Keene." Then, the judge turned to Lance. Lance Whitmore sat stiffly. He was a man who had spent his life controlling outcomes, and now he was watching his control evaporate. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, "you are permanently barred from serving as a fiduciary in this state. The court is referring your case to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice for further investigation into wire fraud. Your assets are frozen pending the outcome of those criminal proceedings." It was over. As the bailiff called for us to rise, Rowan stood up. He buttoned his jacket slowly. He looked across the aisle at Lance. Lance looked back. For a second, I thought Lance might try to say something, an apology, a plea, a reminder of their 30 years of friendship. He opened his mouth, his eyes searching Rowan's face for a flicker of the old bond. Rowan did not say a word. He did not look angry. He looked at Lance with the polite, distant disinterest one might show a stranger on a subway. He turned his back on him and walked toward the aisle. That silence was louder than any scream. It was the sound of a door closing forever. We walked out into the corridor. Grant Holloway was already on his phone, coordinating with the forensic accountants to begin the asset recovery process. He hung up and turned to me, a rare, genuine smile breaking his shark-like demeanor. "It is done," Grant said. "The trust is legally yours. Camilla, we have restructured the instrument. The proxy clauses are gone. No one can sign for you. No one can access a single cent without your biometric authorization. You are the sole trustee." He handed me a thin black folder. "The recovered funds from the seizures will take a few months to clear," Grant explained. "But Rowan has capitalized a bridge account for you in the meantime. You have access to the full principal, $3 million. It is all there." I took the folder. It was just plastic and paper, but it felt heavy. "Thank you, Grant," I said, "for believing me." "I didn't just believe you," Grant said. "I believe the math. The math never lies." Rowan and I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Chicago afternoon. The city moved around us, loud and indifferent. People were rushing to lunch, yelling into phones, hailing cabs. None of them knew that a war had just ended inside that building. "Well," Rowan said, taking a deep breath of the city air. "That is that." He looked at me, and his eyes were wet. "Are you hungry? We could go to the club, or anywhere. We can celebrate." I looked at the folder in my hand. I thought about what Marla had said in her deposition, that she wanted the money because she felt she deserved a better life. I thought about how easy it would be to let the money change me, to become bitter, or flashy, or just another rich girl trying to forget she was ever poor. "I don't want to celebrate," I said quietly. "I just want to sit down." We walked to a park bench near the courthouse fountain. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the water spray into the air. "It is strange," I said finally. "I have the money now. I can buy anything I want. I can buy the house Marla kicked me out of. I can buy the car she drove. But," I looked at my hands. They were still rough from the manual labor at the camp. "But I can't buy being 19 again," I whispered. "I can't buy the nights I spent crying in that basement. I can't buy the friends I lost because I was too ashamed to tell them I was homeless. That is the part they stole. Rowan. And the judge couldn't give that back." Rowan nodded slowly. He didn't try to fix it with platitudes. He didn't tell me to look on the bright side. You are right, Rowan said. That is the tragedy of theft. They take the time, not just the object, and time is the only thing I can't write a check for. He turned to me, his expression earnest. But we can make up for it. Move into the penthouse, Camilla, or I will buy you a place on the Gold Coast. Travel. Go to Paris for real this time. Let me spoil you. Let me give you the life you should have had. I looked at him. I loved him for offering. I really did. He wanted to bury my trauma under a mountain of luxury. It was his way of apologizing, but I shook my head. No, grandfather, I said. Rowan looked surprised. No. If I move into a penthouse today, I said, I am just trading Marla's cage for a gilded one. I would still be the girl who is being taken care of. I would still be defined by the money. I stood up and walked to the edge of the fountain. I am going to start slow, I said. I am going to get a small apartment, a studio, something with a lock on the door that belongs to me. I am going to enroll in university, not because it is expected, but because I want to learn. I looked back at him. I want to build a life, Rowan. I don't want to buy one ready-made. Rowan smiled. It was a proud smile, the kind that reached his eyes. You are stubborn, he said. I had to be. I replied. A week later, I asked Rowan to do one last favor. I asked him to fly me back to North Carolina. He was confused. Why would you want to go back there to that humidity, to the place where you were low? Because I left something there, I said. We took the car to Wilmington. We drove past the old neighborhoods, past the empty lot where I used to park my car to sleep. The memories were there, like ghosts on the street corners, but they couldn't hurt me anymore. I was insulated now, not by the money, but by the truth. We pulled up to the distribution center. The charity camp sign was still hanging crookedly on the fence. The line of people was still there. Tired women holding babies, old men with sunburned necks, teenagers looking at their shoes. Mrs. Higgins was at the front, clipboard in hand, looking as exhausted and formidable as ever. When she saw the Lincoln Navigator pull up, she frowned, probably expecting some politician coming for a photo op. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing designer clothes. I was wearing jeans and a clean white t-shirt. I walked up to the gate. Camilla, Mrs. Higgins squinted at me. I thought you found family. I thought you were gone. I did, I said. And I am. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. It wasn't for millions. It was for $50,000, enough to fix the roof, buy a new generator, and stock the pantry for 6 months. This is for the camp, I said, handing it to her. Mrs. Higgins looked at the check. Her mouth dropped open. She looked at me, her eyes wide. Camilla, this is how— My grandfather, I said, nodding toward the car where Rowan was waiting. He owed some back pay. I looked at the line of people. I saw a girl near the back, maybe 20 years old. She looked scared. She looked invisible. I walked over to her. She flinched when I approached, the same way I used to. Hey, I said gently. She looked up. Hi. Keep your head up, I said. You are not invisible, and this line is not your whole life. It is just a waiting room. The girl looked at me, confused, but she nodded. I walked back to the car. Mrs. Higgins was crying now, clutching the check to her chest. I waved at her when I got back in the car. Rowan was watching me. The air conditioning was humming. The leather seats were soft. You gave them $50,000, Rowan said. That is generous. It is rent, I said, for the space they gave me when no one else would. Rowan signaled the driver to move. As the camp faded into the rearview mirror, Rowan turned to me. So, he said, are you happy? Camilla, did we save you? I looked out the window at the passing trees. I thought about the $3 million in the bank. I thought about Marla losing her house. I thought about Lance losing his reputation. Justice had been served. The scales were balanced, but saved wasn't the right word. You save a drowning victim. You save a kitten in a tree. I hadn't just been saved. I had fought. I had survived. And I had won. I turned to my grandfather, and I gave him the answer that ended the story and started my life. I do not need to be saved, grandfather, I said, my voice steady and sure. I need to be given back the right to own my own life, and for the first time in 24 years, I did. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey of betrayal, justice, and finding the strength to stand up when the whole world is trying to keep you down. I want to know where you are listening from right now. Are you in your car, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed Camila's journey, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.